If you want to find out why I heart my menstrual cup and some of my favorite tips about how to use a menstrual cup yourself, keep on watching. Hey guys, Nicole Harlow here, and welcome to Girl Meets Body, where I'm introducing you to your body one episode at a time. And today we're talking all about menstrual cups, which has got to be one of my favorite inventions that's really helped improve the quality of my menstrual cycle. I've only been using a menstrual cup now for a few years after a mishap that I had probably about a decade ago when I tried to use a menstrual cup for the first time. And this was before I realized that I have a retroverted or retroflex, which is a tilted back uterus. See, most people have a uterus that tilts forward towards the stomach, towards the front of the abdomen. Mine actually tilts back towards my spine or my sacrum, which means that things that go up inside of my vagina don't always sit in the right place. So about a decade ago, I had gotten myself a moon cup, and I put it up and it just wasn't really fitting properly. It wasn't feeling like it was in the right place. And I had read in the manual that you could cut the stem at the bottom to make it sort of fit more comfortably. So I cut the stem and I actually cut it too short. So I kind of ruined my $40 investment that I had spent on a moon cup because it was really hard to get out at that point. Then it kind of sucked up inside of my vagina. I had cut a lot of the stem away, and so I was fishing around with my fingers, and the whole thing gave me a lot of anxiety. And I kind of put it in this okay column, not for me. I just don't think that I can use a menstrual cup. And flash forward to about 2 years ago, I was thinking, all right, Nick, your work is in menstrual cycle. You're talking about sustainable menstrual products all the time. I think you need to give a menstrual cup another chance. So I didn't go with the Moon Cup or the Diva Cup this time around. I actually was in the US at the time visiting my family. And so I went to CVS and I found this little guy. The brand is called Intimina. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've never heard anybody say it. It says Intimina on the front. I had never heard of it before, but I thought I'd just give it a try. This little menstrual cup, it actually came in 2 different sizes. Size A, which is this one, is if you haven't had vaginal childbirth. Then there was a size B, which was if you have had children vaginally. So because I haven't had any kids yet, I picked this one. I think the price was about $40, which can be a little bit of a sting as an investment, but when you think about the money that you're going to save buying pads and disposable tampons, it actually works out really well. So here's what I love about this one. One is it folds down. How cool is that? It folds down to something that's about a centimeter. It fits inside of this little case, which is super tiny, fits right in your pocket, fits right in your pocketbook. It's so easy to travel with. So when I'm not using it, it's completely storable. When you're ready to use it, all you have to do is pop it out, and then you have your menstrual cup. Because it's medical grade silicone, it's not going to absorb microbes or bacteria or pathogens within the silicone itself. So it's really easy to clean, and it's very hygienic and safe. My personal preference is to use the menstrual cup from day 2 of my cycle until pretty much when I finish bleeding. The reason being that for day 1, psychologically, energetically, physically, I like to allow my body the space to bleed freely. I don't like the idea of anything blocking or stopping. I mean, a menstrual cup isn't blocking in the same way that a tampon would, but it still is something inside of the vagina, so I like to give it the space to just flow completely naturally. So what I usually do on day 1 is I use a reusable pad. This is my favorite one from Luna Pads. I've had this for 12 years at least. I got this when I was in college, and it's still going strong. The snaps are super strong. I just give these a wash every cycle, and I boil them just for about 30 seconds to make sure that there's no more bacteria or microbes that are inside of the fabric. So I usually use that on day 1, but something I haven't tried yet are the period underpants. I think they might actually be a really good replacement from the reusable pads to just have a pair of period underwear that I use on day 1. So I find from day 2 onwards, for the most part, this little menstrual cup is enough to do the job. I'm starting at this phase of my life to have a little bit of a heavier flow compared to where I was before. Now that I've healed my PCOS and I'm cycling normally and naturally, I find that my period is heavier. But this little guy is usually enough. I may have to empty it 2 or 3 times throughout the day, depending. Usually on day 2, I would empty it about 3 times. By the time we get to the end of the cycle, then I'm just emptying it once per day. I also find that this size is just enough to get me through the night on my heaviest flow days. But when it comes to the morning, it's usually pretty full. When I take it out, it's about filled to the top here, and I just have to dump it all down. So you may have the question, what do I actually do with a menstrual cup? What's the process? How do I insert it? So what you'll do is, just like using a tampon, find the position that usually feels best for you when you use a tampon. So perhaps you spread your legs and do a little squat. Perhaps you put one foot up on the toilet seat and do a little squat that way. Or you may be the type of person who just puts it in while you're sitting on the toilet with your legs spread. That's usually how I do it. I'm usually on the toilet. So what I do is, you'll take the rim of the menstrual cup, pinch it in the center, and then fold it in half. Now I find you can do it either way, but you see how one part is more rounded and then you have this part that has the two knobs up here? What I find is, if I put it in with the two knobs facing against where my urethra is, which is more towards the top, I find that if I put it in closer to the urethra, it kind of irritates my urethra a little bit. So what I do is I turn it around and I make sure that this smooth part is going in where my urethra is. So when I have that positioned correctly, and like I said, that's just a personal preference, everybody is kind of aligned a little bit differently down there, so it may not bother you, but for me, it did bother me and it was kind of uncomfortable. So once I did the switch and I put this part facing the urethra, it's a much easier insertion. When you're bleeding, you should have enough lubrication to put this inside without really needing an extra lube. But you may find the first couple times, if it feels a little dry, you may need to use a natural water-based lubricant just around the vaginal opening so it's easier to put in. I found that this has never been a problem for me. I've never had to do that, but if you're having problems inserting it, that may be a good solution. So once I have it pinched up like this, I usually hold underneath of the lip of the mouth here. I use these fingers to spread the labia apart so I have more of a surface area to work with. And then it's just a matter of getting this part inside of the opening of your vagina and using your fingers to both keep it pinched and then press it up. And what you'll find, which just happened, is once it goes inside, it will naturally pop open. So you may have to push it up a little bit more. What you want is this stem should be really the only thing that's outside of the vaginal opening. So you want to get it up far enough where you can just feel the stem sticking out, but it doesn't have to be so far up. Like, I feel like a tampon, you have to push it further up in the vaginal canal. This is okay if it's sitting just in the mouth of the vagina, because what it's going to do is it's going to collect the blood as it comes down through the vaginal canal. So there's one last crucial point that you have to do at this point. What you need to do is make sure that this mouth is fully open, or else what you're going to do is get a lot of leakage. So what I like to do is I stick my finger, so here's the vaginal opening, you've got the stem sticking out. I'm going to hold this here just so you know. So all the rest of this would be inside of the vagina at this point. I stick my finger up and I just run it around the outside, and I just make sure, just testing to see that it's all the way open. So I do that, I just run my finger around. And then here's another trick that you can do. You sort of gently pull on the stem a little bit, and what that's going to do is create a suction. It'll make sure that the menstrual cup is in place. If you're finding that it's not really going in the right place, when you're giving just a little tug, you can also spin it around just gently, and that should give it a nice good seal. And what you should find is, if the menstrual cup is in place, that you won't get leakage throughout the day. I generally don't. In fact, the way that my uterus is tilted in a retroverted or retroflexed, this is actually one of the only things that I've been able to use that doesn't give me leakage throughout the day. Because of the way that my vaginal canal is positioned, tampons usually go up and back rather than just going up and forward, which means that they're often not in the right place. So even though the tampon is not full, I get leakage through the side. So if that's a problem that you usually get, maybe the next time you go to the gynecologist, ask them whether you have a retroverted uterus that's tilted backwards, and you may find that that's the problem. But I find that because this sits at the bottom rather than up towards the cervix, it actually works perfect in my vaginal canal, and I have no problems with collecting the blood without any leakage. So the next step can be a little bit intimidating, especially at first, and it's, how do you remove this thing, and how do you know when it's time? Well, it's probably going to take a few months for you to really get a feeling of when it's time to remove it, but I would say you would remove this around the same time when you would remove a tampon, usually every 4 to 6 hours, especially during the first few days of your cycle. You also know that it's time to remove this if you see some breakthrough bleeding or spotting, which is why I recommend, especially at first, using something like this. This is my reusable panty liner. I like to use it in conjunction with a menstrual cup so that if I do get any breakthrough bleeding, it comes onto the panty liner instead of my underwear. Also, another quick tip here is I wear all black underwear. That's because I don't have to have any staining, I don't have to have any worries if I have breakthrough bleeding. So when you're ready to remove it, the menstrual cup has created a seal inside of the vaginal canal. What I like to do is I usually will stick these 3 fingers and I stick them up to kind of grab on to about the bottom third, I'd say, of the menstrual cup, and I give it a little squeeze and a little pinch. Once you've done that, usually that's enough to break the seal, and you should be able to just pull it down gently and slowly, trying to keep it as upright as possible, so remember that it's going to be full of blood. So I like to pinch and pull. Sometimes the seal is kind of strong, and at that point it may not be enough, in which case you pinch and take the pointer finger and just tug slightly inside. Just do a light tug more towards the upper part, and you should feel the seal break, and then you can pull it down like that. What I find is that the fuller that it is, the easier it is to get out because there's some more weight to it. So you want to pull it out gently and slowly. Remember that it's full with blood. Once you get it out and you have it in your hand, you have a few choices here. If you're just sitting on the toilet, you can just turn it and pour it right down the toilet. That's totally fine. Sometimes I lean over and I pour it down the sink. Or you can feed it to your plants. Did you know that? It's a nice kind of hippie trick that you can do with your menstrual cup. After you've dumped it out, either down the toilet, in the sink, or in your plant potters, you need to just go over to the sink, wash this with warm water. If you want to use a natural soap, that's totally up to you. Usually I just use warm or hot water, give it a rinse, and then I'm folding it back up again and putting it back inside. I'll do that for the rest of my period. I wear this at night, I wear this all during the day. In fact, now that I have this, I hardly know that I'm bleeding at all, which is why I personally don't use it on my first day, because I like the feeling of bleeding. I like to know that I'm menstruating, and I love to connect with that part of my womanhood. So I usually give myself the first day to really fully experience the bleeding, the flow, and then the rest of the time I'm using the menstrual cup pretty much exclusively now. When I get to the end of my cycle and I've stopped bleeding, I boil some water in a pot, the same pot that I use to boil my reusable menstrual pads, and I boil this for 30 seconds to a minute. I'm pretty sure that you can also throw this in your dishwasher, but you have to check your specific menstrual cup. Once it's been boiled, I usually stick it like this on a piece of paper towel. I wait until it's dry, and then I condense it back up until it's tiny little form, stick it in its container, and it goes away for the rest of the month. I actually keep it in this cute little bag that has my reusable menstrual pads. And so I've got all my period stuff ready for the next month. Clean and ready to go. So now it's your turn. Let me know, have you ever used a menstrual cup? Do you have any questions, concerns, or comments? Join us in the private Girl Meets Body Facebook group, where we're talking about this and other cool topics related to hormones, menstrual cycle, periods, and just life in general. And if you don't know what the heck is going on with your hormones in your body, use the link below to take my hormonal archetype quiz. It only takes 2 minutes, and it's the perfect first step for your hormonal journey. If you want some more support with your hormones, like you're trying to get pregnant, or maybe you have PCOS or hormonal symptoms, I'd love it if you join me on my Unlock Your Cycle course. You also find the link down below. Finally, if you like this t-shirt, No One Knows I'm Bleeding, you can find it in our Girl Meets Body shop, in addition to other really cool feminist and period t-shirts. If you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? This is Girl Meets Body, and I'm introducing you to your body one episode at a time, and I don't want you to miss anything. Once again, I'm Nicole Harlow. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I can't wait to see you on the next video. Bye.